Hi there and welcome to this video which is in the GCSE crime topic, and it's the key study relating to Einzenk's criminal personality theory by Heaven. So the description. So aim obviously of this study was to test if our personality traits of psychoticism, extroversion, and then this is changed slightly from Einzenk, isn't it? So Einzenk looked at neuroticism, but this is looking at self-esteem, which is part of neuroticism. So to see if those three factors are significant predictors of delinquency 2 years later. So delinquency, if you remember, so that's kind of minor crimes, usually associated with younger people because their study was on people aged 13 to 15. So things like vandalism, that would be an example of a delinquent crime. Method. So it was a self-report, specifically it was a closed questionnaire, and it also used correlational data. So if you remember, correlations are looking at a relationship between variables. So they looked to see if there was a relationship between psychoticism and delinquency, extroversion and delinquency, and then lastly self-esteem and delinquency. Design, it was a longitudinal study, so it took place over 2 years. Participants, they had 282 adolescents, quite a nice mix, so 146 females and 136 males, and they were all from a Catholic high school in Australia, and they were 13 to 15 within the study. After 2 years, the sample did reduce slightly, so to 235, and within that 123 females and 112 males. So procedure. They completed these questionnaires anonymously within class in a test booklet, and it measured their self-esteem using a 10-item measure, their psychoticism, their extroversion, and measures of interpersonal violence and vandalism and theft to obviously measure delinquency. They then repeated this exact same thing in class 2 years later. So results. First results, so males were more likely than females to engage in delinquency at both time 1 and 2. So I know that's not related to personality, but it's still a dispositional factor, so an internal factor, then being male or female, that was related to criminality. Psychoticism at both time 1 and 2 showed the strongest correlation relationship to delinquency, and this was a positive correlation, so meaning that as delinquency scores went up, psychoticism scores went up as well. Then, so there was a weak positive correlation, but it was only weak, between extroversion and delinquency. So again, the idea that as one's going up, the other's going up as well, but this was quite a weak correlation. And there was no significant correlation between self-esteem and delinquency. There was a slight negative correlation at time 2, so as self-esteem was going up, delinquency was going down, but it wasn't significant. So, conclusion, there is some link, it seems, isn't there, between, particularly for psychoticism, between personality and delinquency, but those links don't seem to be strong enough, and also because it's a correlation, to suggest that this is the only cause. There must be other factors involved too. So it does support Einzenk's theory, however, it's suggesting there's other things that are involved in delinquency as well. So evaluation. So it's easy to analyse, so we use rating scales, didn't it, in their part of the closed questionnaires, which produce quantitative data. So it's easy to analyse and look for trends. In this case, we could see that psychoticism had a positive relationship to delinquency, and that was quite easy to do because of this quantitative data produced. It was also ethical, so it was confidential, as students were told that when filling in the questionnaire booklet that their name would not be recorded. You could link that to ethics, but you could also link that to validity, talking about how that may hopefully allow them to be more honest about their delinquency, as it might not be something they want linked to their name, but if it isn't, they might be more honest and therefore results are more valid. Now I'm going to flip this here because you could argue internal validity could be low because they still might lie for fear of punishment. Despite, and make sure you make this clear in your answer, despite the fact you know it was anonymous, they are filling in this questionnaire about delinquency in school, And it might still be that a young person might still fear that punishment or fear getting found out somehow, and therefore lie and say that they haven't committed delinquent acts when actually they have. You can also talk about low construct validity. So remember, construct validity is, are we measuring the full factor in an accurate way? In this case, are we measuring personality and delinquency in an accurate, full way? Well, probably not, because we're trying to do it with closed questions, and these just may not be complex enough to accurately measure a full factor as complex as delinquency and personality. There was also participant attrition, so obviously due to the longitudinal design, that's a weakness of that design, isn't it, that people drop out. In this case, the sample reduced by 20% from time 1 to time 2, and this is an issue because a smaller sample might be less representative. It could even be that with these extra results, links between personality and delinquency might have been stronger. Could be that the 20% of people that dropped out had quite high delinquency scores. We don't know, because that sample has been reduced and that data has been taken with them. It's also ethnocentric, so it's only Australia, so we can't necessarily generalise delinquency and personality results, or the delinquency in male versus female results, to other countries. We can't say it's going to be the same worldwide or even beyond just Australia. And then lastly is correlational data, and we have issues there, don't we, because we can't establish cause and effect. So as much as we can say there's a relationship between personality, specifically psychoticism, and delinquency, we can't say, because it's a correlation, that one is causing the other. So that's always a limitation of that method. Okay, so once again, some exam style questions. Ideally pause this and have a go on your own first, and then listen to the answers, but if you can't, you can just listen along. So the first one, identify which of the following best describes the research method used by Heaven in their study into delinquency. So A, longitudinal case study and correlation. B, longitudinal questionnaire with correlation. C, longitudinal structured interview with correlation. Or D, longitudinal unstructured interview with correlation. There's quite a few to think about there, but hopefully you went for B. So it's a longitudinal questionnaire with correlation. So next one, identify the reason why Heaven's study into delinquency lacked construct validity. So A, because it did not measure neuroticism. B, because it used closed questions and rating scales. C, because it was a longitudinal study. Or D, because 20% of the participants dropped out of the study. So hopefully you went for B there, so because it used closed questions and rating scales. So remember, construct validity is the idea, are we accurately measuring the full factor? So a very simple closed question doesn't always allow you to do that. So say, for example, if it asked whether you were sociable and to rate that, well, that's not really measuring the full factor of how sociable you are very well, because it might depend on the situation. Sometimes you might be incredibly sociable, other times not so. So you're not measuring that full factor, you're being too simple with closed questions and rating scales. C, identify the weakness of the correlational method used in Heaven's study. So is it A, it cannot be used to establish cause and effect. B, it can only be used for self-report. C, it relies on participants not withdrawing from the study. Or D, participants may give socially desirable answers. Okay, so you should have gone for the first one there. So correlations cannot be used to establish cause and effect, so A. Next one, outline 2 criticisms of the procedure used in Heaven's study. So 2 criticisms of the way, so bad things, about the way that they've designed this study, so the procedure. Okay, so anything really about the sample, the use of questionnaires, the use of closed questionnaires specifically, the longitudinal aspect of the research, all of those could be a criticism you go for. But remember, it must have context. So, for example, if you said it used closed questionnaires, which only produce quantitative data, which lacks depth and detail, limiting the understanding researchers get, this sounds like a really strong answer, doesn't it? But actually it only gets 1 out of 2 because you've not got that context. You'd have to add on to that it limits our understanding of how personality and delinquency link. So that would get you your second mark. But any of the evaluation points that I made on the previous slide, you could use for this. You just need to ensure they were explained. Next one, so participants in Heaven's study into personality and delinquency completed questionnaires, which included rating scales. Give one strength of questionnaires. I think sometimes people struggle with this and just go straight to the weakness. But a strength of questionnaires is they're really useful as they're sometimes the only way to access what somebody thinks, feels, and potentially what's happened in their private lives. We can't observe that, can we? It's invisible. We have to ask someone to understand this. So for example, if they have committed crime in the past, or what their self-esteem is like, if we want to know those things, then we need to ask them, and questionnaires are really good for doing that. You could also talk about questionnaires being quite quick and easy. So questionnaires are a quick and easy method to gather data from participants. In this case, it was a case of filling out, obviously two, one at time one and one at time two, questionnaire booklets, but this could have been done within 30 to 40 minutes, and it wouldn't have taken a long time to gather that data, like something like potentially an interview would. It takes much longer. Next and last one, to explain one way the procedure of Heaven's study could be improved. So again, the technique with this one, you need to say what wasn't good, what you do about that, and what was the impact. So the sample, it was only ages 13 to 15. So using a larger age range, so for example, having people from 13 to 25 fill in the questionnaires. This would then allow the researchers to see if there's a link between personality and delinquency in broader age ranges. Okay, so any improvement that you can think, we've talked about the use of closed questions, haven't we? Maybe again, a weakness could be they only use closed questions, so therefore using open questions would benefit this study. So asking a series of open questions about delinquency and personality and really allowing the participant to explain this in their own words. This is good because we could get more depth and understanding and insight into if personality and delinquency could potentially be affecting one another. Okay, that's everything. So again, thank you very much for listening. If you've got any questions, make sure you approach your teacher. Yeah, thank you.